Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi met world leaders at the G20 summit, highlighting India's rise on the global stage.
He's going from one Indian to
The summit was also attended by Chinese President Xi Jinping, while Dr. Jaishankar met his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi. But back home in India comes a chilling warning. Indian economy will suffer from joining China-led RCEP, and New Delhi must avoid any free trade deal agreement with Beijing. This warning has been issued by think tank Global Trade Research Initiative, days after Niti Aayog CEO called for India to join the China-led trade deal. The GTRI report states, quote, India cannot have a bilateral FTA with China due to its large trade deficit. However, joining RCEP would be even more problematic. In a bilateral FTA with China, India could delay tariff reductions, but under RCEP, Chinese goods could enter India easily through other RCEP countries with minimal processing right from the start, unquote. GTRI warns against China's opaque trade policies, saying RCEP would lead to cheap Chinese goods flooding the Indian markets unchecked, causing massive harm to small Indian manufacturers. But why the sudden debate on China-led regional comprehensive economic partnership? And what has been Modi government's official stand on this trade pact? GTRI report adds, quote, introducing tariff-free Chinese goods into India would overwhelm MSMEs as their smaller scale operations are unlikely to withstand competition from China's mass manufacturing, unquote. The warning comes days after Niti Aayog CEO BVR Subramaniam surprised the industry by calling for a review of India's rejection of RCEP in 2019 after years of consultations. The India-China trade situation is particularly alarming. New Delhi faces an $85 billion trade deficit with Beijing in FY24. GTRI report claims, quote, if India had joined the RCEP, the deficit would have been much worse due to zero tariff imports, unquote. So will joining the RCEP reduce this trade deficit and help boost the Indian economy, or make it even worse for India? It's a difficult question to answer. So let's get some idea. Let's take a look at other nations who joined the RCEP with China and what was the impact on their bilateral trade with China. According to data, after signing of RCEP, the trade deficit of member countries, even including Japan and South Korea, with China has worsened, while ASEAN region's trade deficit with China surged to $135.6 billion in 2023, up from $81.7 billion in 2020. Japan's trade deficit with China has doubled, and for the very first time, South Korea is expected to face a trade deficit with China this year. GTRI elaborates further, quote, this indicates that RCEP's gains are disproportionately skewed towards China, leading to unfair competition and validating India's fears that joining would lead to a surge in Chinese imports without corresponding benefits, unquote. If developed nations such as Japan and South Korea have seen their trade deficit with China worsen due to RCEP, will that also apply to India? The GTRI report also counters the argument that RCEP would give India access to vast trade region that accounts for 30% of global trade. It says India already has free trade agreements or FTAs with 13 out of 15 RCEP members. So what is the need of RCEP and opening India's markets to greater inflow of cheap Chinese products? The only two RCEP nations India does not have an FTA with are China and New Zealand, according to the report prepared by the GTRI founder Ajay Srivastav and trade expert Abhijit Das. Quote, trade with New Zealand is small, thus any benefits from RCEP will likely be minimal and incremental, unquote. Additionally, the report challenges the claim that RCEP membership would help India integrate into the global value chain, saying India already is the fastest growing global economy, while India's GDP is set to eclipse Japan and become the world's fourth biggest just next year in 2025. It also adds that RCEP is unlikely to create significant new export opportunities for Bharat, and even counters that RCEP would lead to more FDIs, given that India is already reaping benefits of China Plus One policy. This as FDI inflows have soared to $70.9 billion in 2023-24, up from $45.1 billion in 2014-15. So why has the Niti Aayog CEO called for a review of RCEP? Could this China trade pact actually be beneficial to India? BVR Subramaniam had argued, quote, "It will be best for India's micro, small and medium enterprises or MSMEs sector. 40% of India's exports are from MSMEs. Big corporates are not great exporters. I don't think we have captured the China plus one opportunity as much as we could have," unquote. So what exactly is this RCEP? Pegged as the world's largest trade pact, RCEP groups 15 Asia-Pacific economies, including Australia, Japan, New Zealand, and the 10-member ASEAN group with China. The RCEP deal was signed in 2020. However, the Modi government of India rejected it, citing unresolved core issues. Relations between the two nuclear-armed nations soon deteriorated, especially after the Galwan Valley clashes in 2020 at the LAC, which resulted in the deaths of several soldiers on both sides. The BJP-led NDA government under Prime Minister Modi has been consistent on any trade deal with China. India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal just on the 22nd of September had rejected the idea of joining RCEP, saying, quote, "India is not going to join the RCEP because neither did it reflect the guiding principles on which ASEAN was started, nor is it in the nation's interest to do a free trade agreement with China," unquote. Goyal, in fact, also slammed Beijing for its non-transparent economy with very opaque economic practices, unquote. Meanwhile, post-2020, India has also imposed additional restrictions on FDIs from China. Pulling no punches, India's Commerce Minister also accused Beijing of taking undue advantage of the World Trade Organization's policies by flooding markets with low-quality products at cheap prices, which in turn hurt local economies. India has made one thing clear to China: border before broader. While the 4-year military standoff has ended after Modi-Xi meeting at the BRICS summit, the trust deficit still remains at the border, as well as the long-standing border dispute. So is India doing well without China's RCEP? India's economy is set to grow to become $10 trillion economy by 2032, according to data collected by IDBI Capital. India is expected to add $1 trillion to its GDP every 18 months, positioning itself as the world's third largest economy before 2030. The GDP growth will eventually lead to better per capita income and a better standard of living in decades ahead. Expressing confidence, Prime Minister Modi had posted on X, quote, "The Q4 GDP growth data from 2023-24 shows robust momentum in our economy, which is poised to further accelerate. This is a trailer of things to come," unquote. A famous saying comes to mind: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Have your say. Should India join RCEP or continue to reject any free trade deal involving China? Leave a comment with your opinion, hit the like button and subscribe to Inconnect News.